We're looking now for a pasuk here in the Gemara on Daf Mem Chesam and Beis to support the Shita Reish Lakish that Kinyan Peros Lav Kekinyan Aguf. And we're in Vayikra Chafei, and the pasuk says, "B'mispar shanim achara yovel tikne me'es amisecha b'mispar shnei tfuos yimkar loch." Now, there are two ways of evaluating the erech of the karka. And the simple way would be simply, that the tashlum for the karka, in a case of erchin, would be the erech of the karka itself. But the Torah says not like that. The Torah adds the stipulation of b'mispar shonim. What does that mean? We calculate how many years is it until the Yovel. And based on that calculation, we're going to determine the value of the karka. Now, this makes sense, argues Rava, according to Reish Lakish, that Kinyan Peros Lav Kinyan Aguf. Which means that since the Yovel is Noeg, all you have now, the buyer of the field, is Kinyan Peros. And if it's the Kinyan Peros, then he's only buying the karka for the Peros. And every year, he will receive such and such an amount of Peros. So therefore, the value from his perspective is going to be the sum total of the annual, how many years he has until the Yovel. Masnisa. Now we're going to bring a proof from a brisa to support Reish Lakish. This Sanya. Now we have to keep in mind that Bechar inherits Pishnayim from Muchzak, but not from Ro'ui. In other words, whatever the father had in his Rishus at the time of his death, that's divvied up in a way that the Bechar gets twice the portion, and that's a Gemara Masechet Bechoros Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis, that it's Matzu B'Yad Aviv. And the pasuk says in Dvarim Chafal, B'chol asher yimotzei lo. But then you have Roy, right? There are Nechasim that eventually will come into the estate of the father after the death of the father. There's no din of Chaluka of Netilas Shtayim for the Bechar with regard to Roy. This Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Bechar, who inherits his father, noto pishnai b'soda chozeres li aviv b'yovel. He will inherit a double portion in a soda that reverts back to the father's estate during Yovel. So with the death of the father, the field goes back to the Achin. Now, at the moment that the father died, the Sada was already sold to someone else, but it's going to come back into the Rishus of the father. So that means it's Roy. And yet, the Brisa says, Notel Pishnayim. So it means that even at the time that the karka is in the hands of the Lokeach, nevertheless, it's considered as if it's in the Rishus of the father. Otherwise, it'd be Roy and not Muchzah. Why is it in the Rishus of the father? The answer is because all the Lokeach has when the Yovel is Noeg is a Kinyan Peros, and Kinyan Peros Lav Kinyan Aguf. Amar by Naktinan, how do we paskin? Baal b'nichsei ishto tzorech harsha. What does that mean? We have halacha that a person could stand in din, meaning in judgment in front of a bezdin on dini mominus, only if he's a baal din, meaning it's his possession. Now, the husband owns the peros of his wife's karka by virtue of the ksuba. Who has the status of the baal din if there's going to be any litigation regarding these nechasim? On the one hand, the guf hanechasim, the guf hakarka, belongs to the wife. On the other hand, the baal has the peros, the kinyan peros. And By Paskins that the Baal could only stand in front of the Bezdin as a Baldin if he receives our Shah, which is a special shtar that appoints a Shliach, and the Harsha is to be written by the woman, by the married woman, allowing the Baal to stand in front of Bezdin and be done in these nechasim. Why? Because Kinyan Peros, Lav, Kinyan Aguftami. And the karka belongs to the Isha, not to the Baal. But then Abai adds a stipulation. V'lo amarn ela delo noches apere. Avol noches apere migad mishtoi dina apere mishtoi dina gufa. When do we require our shah from the Isha to allow the Baal to stand in front of Bezdin as a Baal Dover Lodin Banachosim? That's only because lo noches apere. In other words, that other tovea, the plaintiff, is claiming a claim about the karka itself. But if he's claiming about the peiros of the karka, then as far as the peiros of the karka, Abai says, certainly the Baal is a Baldin. And then Abai adds a migu. Migu the mishtoi dina peri, mishtoi dina gufa. Once he has the right and the status of Baldin to stand in front of Bezdin to defend and protect his ownership rights on the peiros, he can now deal with the gufa karka as well. Hadron alecha hasholech. Now we start Perek Hanizakim, which I think is very interesting. I have to figure out exactly when we get to all the Agada to Churban Abayis. Does it overlap with the 3 weeks? Now, the previous Perek had dealt with what we call Tikkun Olam, and now we're going on with other takanos, additional takanos of Tikkun Olam. And the first one is what's called Seder Gevir. When you have a Baal Chov and now he collects karka, karka is divided up into 3 different categories. There's Idis, the best, there's Ziburis, the worst, and then there's Beinanis in the middle. And here we're going to divide the rights of the Baal Chov to collect from which type of karka into 3. We're going to have a discussion about a nizak who collects from the mazik, and we're going to have a discussion about the isha who has to collect haksuba, and about a malva who has to collect from the lov. And in each case, there's a different right to collect karka, which means whether it's idis, ziburis, or beinanis. Now, the Torah itself takes a stand on this question of the rights of a Baal Chov to collect from, let's say, idis, for example, in the parsha of Nezikin. And the Gemara Bava Kama Daf Zayin establishes that since the pasuk says Meitav Sadeu, that the mazik has to fork over to the nizak Meitav, the best karka, and now we have a question: what is the best karka? One opinion is called Bishalohein Shamin. In other words, we look at the karka of the nizak, and we see which quality of karka would be meitav based on all the karkos in the possession of the nizak hatovea. We have another man there that says b'shel olam hein shamin. What is meitav will determine objectively based on all the karkos in the world, and we have Michel Mazik shamin. So now we get to the first takon. Hanizakin, when it comes to the claim of the nizak who's been damaged for compensation from the mazik, and let's say the mazik has various categories of karka, which karka does the nizak have rights to collect for compensation? Shamin lahen be'idis. So therefore, the Nizak has rights to collect his chov, his compensation from the mazik, be'idis. And we're going to assume now it means idis of the mazik. Let's say the mazik has the best karka. The Nizak will collect in lieu of tashlum nezik, compensation for his nezek, from the idis of the mazik. Again, we have to emphasize this has nothing to do with the amount of money that the Nizak is going to be paid. It's always the same amount of money, but the Nizak would rather get a smaller piece of karka that's idis than a larger piece of karka that's beinanis or ziburis, because even though they're all worth the same, but if he gets a smaller piece of karka that's idis, it's so much easier for him to liquidate it by selling it on the market. There's a large demand for idis. Then we get to the second category of a bal chov, meaning a malva. The malva collects his chov from the karka of the lova, and that's based on the concept of shibud. And if the lova has many different types of qualities and categories of karka, then bezdin is shaman bibeinanis, which means that let's map out all the karkos that belong to the lova and classify them as either idis or beinanis, and the middle category will be beinanis. Idis or ziburis, and the middle category will be beinanis. And again, he'll get the size of karka that's worth whatever the halva, whatever the chov is. But he can collect from beinanis. However, ksubas isha is on the bottom of the list. When she collects her ksuba from the karka of her husband after gerushin or after his death, then she only collects beziburis. Rabbi Meir disagrees, af ksubas isha bebeinanis. And her claim on the husband's karka is equal to that of the malva's claim on the lova's karka, and therefore she can collect from beinanis. Okay, now we have another takon. Ein nifroim min nechasim mishubadim b'makom sheyesh nechasim b'nei chorin. If someone is chayav and the Baal Chov comes to collect the karka, he cannot do so if the person who's chayav has liquid assets. Vafilu hein ziburis. And even if the karka that he has is the lowest level of lowest quality karka, and that's called ziburis, nevertheless, that's the, just one second, and he collects from Ben Chorin. All right, and he collects from Bnei Chorin even if the karka is ziburis. Now, this halacha could apply in collection from the love, but there's another halacha here. Let's say, for example, the lova has no karka. He had karka at the time of the alpha, and he sold it to someone, and that karka is meshubad. In the hands of the lokeach who purchased it from the lova, there's a shibud. And now, if the malva comes to collect his chov from the lova, and the lova has no karka, then he goes and collects the karka that was sold to the lokeach. And let's say the lokeach has karka that's idis or beinanis. And basically, if let's say we had an example of a nizak, the nizak would have rights to collect from the lekuchos of the mazik from idis, which is a great deal. That's what they'd want. But no. They can't do so. They have to collect directly from the lova because the lova has assets which are called Bnei Chor, even if it's not karka. Now we have another takana. If there's a tovea who claims that the estate of the father after his death, that now has been inherited by the soman, owes him money, then he only collects from ziburus. Okay, now to introduce the last part of the Mishnah, No, not the last part of the Mishnah, sorry. But the part of the Mishnah says, Ein motzion lachilas peros ulishvach karkos. Okay, so now we have to introduce Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Ruvain owes a sod, and Shimon steals the sod and sells it to Levi. In the meantime, Levi has no idea that the character that he purchased, I have to add another stipulation, and the sale was what's called be'achrayus. Now, Levi works the land, and he's mashbiach the karka. The karka now goes up in value. Not only that, Levi, the lokeach, produced fruit. And the trees that are growing from this stolen karka are now growing fruit. Now we find out that the karka that Levi purchased from Shimon was really Reuven's karka. It was stolen. And now Reuven, the original owner, the Nigzal, has rights to collect his soda back with the peros on them. Now, those peros grew because the Lokeach invested in the field. So therefore, the Nigzal, we call him Reuven, has to reimburse Levi, the Lokeach, for any hotzaot, for any expenditures. But Reuven, the rightful owner, will collect the soda with the peros. He's got to reimburse the Lokeach, not for the value of the peros, but rather for the amount of money that the Lokeach invested in order to plant and grow these peros. And that's called, in the Lashon HaShas, Yored L'tov Sodeh Shel Chaver Shelo B'Rshus. Okay, now, the Lokeach's karka that he purchased from Shimon the Gazlan has been ripped out of his hands, but the sale of the karka from Shimon the Gazlan to Levi, the Lokeach, was with achrayus. So that means now, after the field is taken away from the Lokeach, meaning from Levi, now Levi has recourse to go back to Shimon who sold it to him, that no good Gazlan Shimon, to return all the money, every last penny that he paid for the field, and he should also be paying him for the peros. Because those peros, really, according to the Mechira, if it wasn't stolen, would belong to Levi. And now they're being taken away from Levi and given back to Reuven the Nigzal. Not only that, but the Gazlan Mocher, in the context of his achrayus, has to even pay for the increment in value that the Lokeach was mashbiach the karka. Let's say, for example, he fertilized the land. Now, what happens if the Gazlan has no money to pay, but in the meantime, he sold karka, other karka, which was not stolen, right, to other lokchin? Now, since that they purchased the karka subsequent to the sale of the karka from Shimon to Levi, therefore, all their karkos are mishubadim to the achrayus of that mechira, of that sale of Shimon to Levi. And Levi, therefore, can now come and be gova from mishubadim, meaning from those lekuchos who purchased karkos from Shimon the Gazlan. And that's to the tune of the amount of money that he paid for the field. And the reason for this din is because the Mocher, the Gazlan, wrote achrayus in the shtar. And therefore it's like a milv b'shtar, and he could collect from the lekuchos. So now after that long-winded introduction, we're ready for the takon of ein motziin lachilas peros ulishvach karkos. From those karkos that were sold to various lekuchos subsequent to the sale of the stolen karka by Shimon to Levi, and the sale was b'achrayus. This Lokeach, this Levi has no rights to collect from lekuchos for peiros, and neither for shvach karkos. Ein motziim me'osan hakarkos shebiyad lekuchos kidei l'shalem v'lokech es hamagilo b'tmur lachilas peiros, which were taken away by Ruvain the Nigzal, v'lo l'shvach karkos. Okay, next, another takon. So too, we're not going to collect from the lekuchos for mazon isha v'abonos. And possibly we'll see the Gemara if they tikkun olam, because the lekuchos have no clue how much of a shibud there is for the mazon isha v'abonos. And finally, we have the principle of Meshav Aveda at the beginning of Mitzia, Vamotzi Mitzia Lo Yishavim Neitikunol. So you find a lost object, and now when you return it to the owner says, hey, wait a minute, there's only 3 here. I lost 5. You pocketed 2. And the Motzi says, no. I only found 3. That's called Modav Mixas. He should be taking a shvu on the other 2, but there was a Takanas Chachamim to encourage a person to return an Aveda, that even though he's a Modav Mixas and he's chayav a shvu, we're going to exempt him from a shvu. Frek the Gemara, I don't understand the first takana that the Nizak will collect damages from the idis of the mazik. Mipnei tikkun olam, midoraisi d'chsiv meitav sadeh meitav karbo yishalim. The mazik has to pay the Nizak from idis. It says meitav sadeh. So why does the Mishnah say that no, the Nizak collects from the idis only because of tikkun olam? And the Gemara says above a Daf Hey that we derive from meitav sadeh for all nizikim that the Nizak collects from idis. So this is not a takana derabbanan mishum tikkun olam. Gemara answers, Rabbi lo tzricha elo l'Rabbi Yishmael di'omer deraisa b'de Nizak shayminan kamashu ne'tikkun olam shayminan b'de mazik. Rabbi Yishmael has a new interpretation of the word sadeu in the pasuk meitav sadehu. Who's the who? And he holds it's meitav sadeu of the Nizak. So we look at all the karkos of the Nizak and evaluate which is the idis of the Nizak. The mazik has karka that's even of superior quality to the idis of the Nizak. But shayminim b'de mazik, that's only takonis olam. That's only midrabanan. Midoraisa, according to Rabbi Shmuel, the Nizak only has rights to collect his best karka, but not the best karka of the mazik. My Rabbi Shmuel decided. Where do we find the price of Rabbi Shmuel? And we're talking about the parsha of Nizkei Shein V'Regel. And in Shein V'Regel, which is called Urche, he pays Nezek Sholem. And the parsha is in Mishpatim Shmos Chav Beis, Meitav Sadeh, Meitav Karma Yishalem. Says Rabbi Shmuel, Meitav Sadeh shall Nizak, Meitav Karma shall Nizak. Now the Gemara at this point mistakenly understood that Rabbi Shmuel is not talking about which karka of the mazik he pays, but rather how much does the mazik have to pay. Which means, if let's say Ruvain's animal enters into Shimon's field and eats up Shimon's peiros, now peiros will grow in arugos, right? Different lines, different, how do you say aruga in English? I forgot. But different lines of peiros. And according to the Gemara's Havamina here in Rabbi Shmuel, even though the hezek that was caused by Shein V'Regel of Ruvain's cow was on an aruga which was Ziburis, nevertheless, just 1 second. Business Wait a minute, why is that called Meitav Sadeu Shalmi? Oh, I see. The Gemara thinks that even though the Nizak has better fields, which is called Meitav, nevertheless, just 1 second. All right, that even though the aruga that was destroyed by the Shem Vregel was Ziburis, nevertheless, according to Rabbi Shmuel, Meitav Sadeh Shal Nizak, we're going to assess that loss based on the aruga of Idis, of the best aruga in the field of the Nizak. Again, once again, I have to emphasize, it's not enough community in terms of how much you pay. No. I'm sorry. I'm already jumping to the Maskon of the Gemara. In the Hamami of the Gemara, the aruga of Idis would have caused a loss to the Nizak of 100, but before the loss of the Nizak was only 50 because the aruga that the Shein Varegel devoured was only Ziburis. Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Omer. Lo ba hakasuv elo ligvos l'nizikim in idis v'kavachomer lehegdish. So Rabbi Akiva says a Meitav Sadeu is coming to be machmer on the mazik. Second, I'm sorry, lo ba'akos. I left out. Right, that's the disadvantage of using a mesifta, because sometimes you forget when you turn the page. Whereas if you learn from a regular Gemara, you wouldn't forget the first 2 words on the previous page in mesifta. Anyway, lo ba'akos. This interpretation of Rabbi Shmuel is absolutely unacceptable. You're going to be machmer on the mazik to pay more than that which he damaged? You're going to imagine it as if he damaged an aruga mishubachas when the Shein Varegel only damaged an aruga grua. Ella, but rather, what does the pasuk have in mind? Ligvos and nizakim in idis. We look at the various karkos of the mazik. We decide which is the idis of the mazik's karka, and that's where the nizak is going to collect from. Again, the same value. Frek the Gemara. How could Rabbi Shmuel say such a thing? Rabbi Shmuel, ochal shmeina mishalim shmeina, but ochal krusha mishalim shmeina. If the animal ate up an aruga krusha, a week, the peros are barely living, and now you're going to make him pay as if he destroyed an aruga shmeina? And Gemara says, Amar Rav Idi bar Avin, you misinterpreted Rabbi Shmuel. Hochma yaskina kagon sha'ochla aruga mi bein arugos. Below yadinani krusha ochal ishmeina ochal mishalim lemi meitav. We're going to be machmir against the mazik, and even though we don't know whether or not, there are a lot of damages here, but whether or not his behema damaged the aruga mishubachas, which is called shmeina, or the aruga krusha, we're going to impose upon him a penalty, a payment, as if we knew for sure that the animal had destroyed an aruga mishubachas. Oh my Rava, that can't be true. Ili adina de krusha achal mishalim krusha. He would only pay 50 and not 100 if we only knew that this was an aruga. So now we have a suffix. Hashelo yadinon is mishalim shmeina. Is it possible that he'd pay 100 when it's 50% chance that he only damaged him half that amount? Hamotzi mechavel raya. And I assume that Rav Idi bar Avin was aware of this kasha, but he held that the Torah is going to be machmer in this case of suffix, and it's going to go lechumra in favor of the motzi, which is the nizak, and the nizak is going to have rights to collect shmeina. Elomer of Achabar Yaakov. The pasuk is not coming to tell me how much he would pay, but rather which karka he pays. Here we take a look on Daf Mem Tes. Hachamayaskinon kigon shahoisa idis the nizak kizi buris the mazik. The best karka of the nizak was like the worst karka of the mazik. In other words, the mazik owns many different karkos that are much better and superior to the best quality karka of the nizak. Rabbi Shmuel Savar, but in nizak shaiminon. We're going to go to the karka of the nizak, and we're going to see which is the meitav, the best karka that the nizak owns. And the mazik will now have to fork over his karka, which is really ziburis for him, that equals the level of the meitav of the idis of the nizak. Rabbi Akiva Sober bin a mazik shaiminin. No, you're being too lenient on the mazik. Let the mazik pay his meitav from the best field that he has. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel says, no, he only pays from the best field of the nizak. And my time with Rabbi Shmuel, the Gemara now is going to darshan psukim to prove Rabbi Shmuel. But based on this sheet of Rabbi Shmuel, we're going to assume the tikkun olam of our Mishnah and Shaiminim b'demazik. So really, according to the Din Doraisa, Rabbi Shmuel would say Shaiminim b'denizak, and we're going to let the mazik off the hook, and all he has to give is the idus of the nizak, even though the mazik, has much, much better, superior quality karka. And the tikkun olam was, we don't want the nizak to take a loss. We want to allow the nizak to collect from the best karka of the mazik. Well, that was a daf. Okay, wishing you a great day. Thank you so much. And I'll let you know about the schedule tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that we're going to learn at 7:30 tomorrow, because I don't have that early Iyun Shir tomorrow. So if you don't hear from me, 7:30 tomorrow.